Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner. I'm a programmer and film critic based in Toronto, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Jacob Anderson, an actor you'll recognize from his appearances on shows like Game of Thrones, Broadchurch, and Doctor Who, and in films like Chat Room, Come Down, and Overlord. He's also the star of HBO's Interview with the Vampire, which is getting ready to shoot its third season, and this Valentine's Day you can see him traverse the centuries in high style as part of the ensemble in Alice Lowe's chronological romantic comedy, Timestalker, available in US theaters and on digital this Friday. It's a delightfully odd movie. I can't even begin to explain how much fun it is, but you should see it. Speaking of delightfully odd movies, Jacob picked Hot Rod, the 2007 comedy that marked the big screen arrival of The Lonely Island, Andy Samberg, Jorma Taccone, and Akiva Schaffer. Samberg stars as Rod Kimball, a small-town daredevil determined to raise $50,000 for his stepfather Frank's life-saving heart transplant, so Frank will be healthy enough for Rob to finally beat him in physical combat. Look, you're either on board or you're not, but if you are on board, you'll get to see one of the strangest studio films of the early 2000s, with Samberg and Taccone joined by Danny McBride, Bill Hader, Chris Parnell, Isla Fisher, Will Arnett, Sissy Spacek, and Ian McShane as the formidable Frank. So paste on your mustache and let's ride. This is Someone Else's Movie.
It's weirdly a very important film to me, or it's kind of become a very important film to me. Again, I'm not here to argue for the canonization of Hot Rod, but I just think it's like, I don't know, it's a film with like a singular charm. Like, it just has like this really specific charm that reminds me a little bit of myself at a certain point in my life, kind of at the point at which I saw the film for the first time. But it's one of those films that I saw it in the middle of the day. I just moved to London. I saw it in Leicester Square Cineworld. And I was the only person in the cinema, which I think was probably quite a common occurrence for this film. And I just it was a point in my life where I was watching everything. Like, I just went to see whatever was out. And not like I was aware peripherally of Lonely Island, but kind of thought that this was just another Ferrell and McKay clone. And then just proceeded to melt into this film. It just feels I don't want to sound pretentious. It just feels like it's pure id. It's just like a brain explosion. It's so juvenile and silly, but it just has so much heart. And I actually watch this film maybe I watch it once or twice a year, I'd say, because it just reminds me of something really important. Like, there's Denise character in the film, Isla Fisher, says this thing that I tell myself all the time, which is it's only embarrassing if you care what people think. And I feel like that is what this film is, both in the way that it was made, and the premise is so silly, but also really emotional, and everybody's committing. This was the movie that I watched. I'm in a show called Interview with the Vampire, and it's very highly emotional, very dramatic vampire show. And this was what I watched the day before my first day of work, because I was the way that everybody just commits to the film, to the way that actors commit to this film, and everybody involved is inspiring. It's truly inspiring. I'm a little bit in love with this film, and I feel like it doesn't get enough love.
Oh, it does not. I I'm so glad you chose it. I had the opposite experience than yours. I saw it in a packed house. A
Wow.
press it was a press screening, sneak preview, a Wednesday night before the Friday opening. This was at the Scotiabank Theatre in Toronto, so there was probably 300 or 400 people. It was one of the big rooms. Samberg was there and came out and did a little Q&A afterwards. It was like a surprise appearance. He'd been doing press, but no one knew he was going to be at the screening. So it it did not play. The audience did not know what to do with it. And he came out and people applauded because it's Andy Samberg and everybody's very excited. But there was also this really fascinating push and pull between the audience. Like, just nobody wanted to ask questions. There was nothing. Like, he ended up sort of entertaining us with a moderator because people didn't want to. Like, somebody finally asked about the music, like, why are all the songs by Europe? And he said, well, that's what's they used. I think he said that they licensed the entire album, The Final Countdown, except for the song The Final Countdown, because that's what people would have expected.
Which is such a hot rod move. That is exactly the choice this film makes at every turn.
Yeah, it's the music in Rod's head, is how he put it. That's what we're seeing.
Oh, I love that. That breaks my heart to hear that. But I'm also kind of not surprised. Like, I've recommended this film to people, and they've said, "Yeah, it was quite funny." And I sort of understand that. And there's quite a lot of, as well, I've had frustration at the cool beans of it, like, and the fall, like, all these things that to me are, I don't know, I almost feel like they're signifiers of like somebody not really giving themselves over to a film.
Yeah. Kate, my wife, hadn't seen it, so we watched it over the weekend. I just wanted to see how it would play for her. And she just said, like, it's not my sort of comedy. It's not what I thought I find funny. And I get that, but I was just sitting there with the biggest grin on my face with all of it. It's so much fun now too, almost 20 years later, watching Bill Hader, who is, has come out and defined himself as one of the sharpest and most scarily talented film enthusiasts. Like, he's not a filmmaker, he lives and breathes it. Not just a filmmaker, rather. And here he is just playing the role that Bill Hader would have played in 2007, which it's just like, he's like a smart missile in the middle of all of this, just quiet. Your eye just goes to him, whatever he's doing in the corner. And everybody in it is alive.
They are, and they're just like, nobody. How do I put it? It's like nobody looks away, if that makes sense. Like, no one backs off. Everybody in the film, they're just fully committed to telling this story with arguably the most ridiculous premise ever. Like, I'm gonna raise money to cure my stepfather so I can beat him up.
Yeah.
Like, it's a difficult film to kind of like, I almost like chickened out of talking about this film because it's a very difficult one to explain. You just want to say, like, just watch it and just like commit to the film, and the film will reward you for that. But yeah, I everybody is so committed to what they're doing, and it really pays off. And it just keeps going further than you expect it to go.
Yeah, I think there is. When we started, I showed you the HD DVD copy that I have of Hot Rod, and it is that sort of artifact. It's of a moment where, in retrospect, it makes perfect sense. The films that the Lonely Island guys have done since, specifically Popstar, they have the same full-on commitment, the strange energy of people who have goaded each other into doing a thing that they wouldn't do individually. to the point where, like, I don't know if you've seen the supplements on the discs, but there's a 7-minute making of which is just the three of them shitting on each other and just
Yeah.
refusing to take it seriously. And there's this one little bit of truth to it, which is that I think it's Norma Taccone says the script originally started as a Will Ferrell vehicle, and then they got involved and made it dumber for Samberg. And I kind of see that, because there's stuff that Ferrell did. The way he explains it in the bit is that there was much more grandiosity to the script. The sort of "may the ancestors protect you," that was sort of the defining idea of this guy that Rod was strutting around. And obviously Ferrell would have been at least 10 years older, so he would have been kind of more of a man child. And Samberg, who's, you know, like, he's still got baby fat, he still looks like a kid and can convincingly be somebody who's, you know, ambivalent to growing up and ambiguous in his age, and maybe he's 22 and maybe he's 28, and it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, these characters could be 15, you know, like they could be 15, 16, and not a lot would change.
Yeah.
and I love that. But the joke is never, I don't at least feel that the joke is on them. The joke is on Will Arnett's character.
Yeah.
You know? And to an extent, Frank, the stepfather, like it's also just, it's really not a mean-spirited film. Like, that's something that I love about it. I think something that helps it to age well is that, like, it doesn't punch down. It doesn't punch down. It's like, especially, I think when you think of it in context to, say, Superbad, which I think Superbad is a very funny film. At the time, I loved it. You watch it now, there are some jokes that I kind of squirm at. You know, there's none of that in this film. Like, the joke is on the adults, the people that have succumbed to adulthood and don't have that, you know, hope anymore.
The ones who just don't get it.
Yeah, and it is. I think you're saying, you know, like, grandiose. It does feel large in scale, but it's so small. It's so personal. The stakes are so low. But I think because it establishes that almost immediately, it means that, like, it gives the rest of the film license to just go anywhere. You know, it's like you're in this small town with these 4 friends, and they're not very good at what they do, kind of in a in a broader sense, but it means that we can put anything around them and it will make sense because you're in their world. Like, it's so the other thing I love about it is so lived in. Like, their relationship, it feels really specific. And yeah, like, there's the jelly beans.
That's right.
Like, the jelly bean tasting and the dancing. And there's a moment where, so I watched it again the other day because we're going to talk about it. I was like, you don't need to, you know, not really need. I would have probably watched it in the next few months anyway. But there's this little moment where Kevin, Rod's little brother, I think Yorma Taccone's like older than Andy Samberg, but there's this moment where he's making a plasticine penguin, and it's not referenced. It's never referred to again, and it just is this tiny little detail that tells you a lot about that character and about that group. And the film is full of those small things that, like, really warrants a rewatch. Yeah, as you can tell, I love this film.
Oh, no, it's great. The thing I'm thinking of, I always come back to Chris Parnell as someone who similarly has a tiny, pointless dream, right? Like this is going to be the thing that brings back AM radio. And he has monologues about the sanctity of broadcast radio and how, I wish you could see this, but of course it's radio. And just the deadpan that Parnell brings to it, but also the kindness and the enthusiasm. I think that's what it is. Everyone in this film believes in something.
Yeah.
With the exception of, I mean, even Frank, even Ian McShane, who was fresh off of Deadwood, which is just so bizarre, where he's played the most formidable human being on the planet. And now here he is punching Andy Samberg in the head with an oar for purposes of masculinity. Like he has a code. He knows what he's doing. It's terrible. But
I mean, he's a man that owns throwing stars.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. He is a man with a dream and a code as well.
And what is it? Indonesian fighting sticks?
Yeah.
He pulls out.
Yeah.
They're just broom handles.
I think I did. I listened to the Seth Meyers and Lonely Island podcast occasionally, and I listened to the Hot Rod episode, and they were talking about that they were speaking to Paramount. Again, this is a studio movie, and it's like a studio comedy, sort of about sport, sort of not at a time where there were so many studio comedies about either teenagers or sports. And but yeah, that the studio had asked them who they wanted for the film, and I think Sissy Spacek was mentioned, and Ian McShane, and they were like, "Can we get them for this?" And like it has that, like, it doesn't feel like a sort of big broad studio comedy. It feels like a film that Sissy Spacek and Ian McShane would do, just because they were like, this is going to be a fun 10 days or whatever.
Yeah. And they don't condescend to the material at all. Like Spacek puts so much into this sort of quiet support that she has for everyone. She's not a matriarchal character. I mean, we know how powerful an actor she is, and she's just quietly being there for people, just showing up, and her concern for Frank is genuine. That scene where Rod comes home and Frank's on the couch and hugging Kevin, that's a real moment that's going on. And Samberg just plays this oblivious, selfish need to be the star of the moment. Like, what's going on? Why isn't anyone paying attention to me? And then,
is this some kind of interactive theater art piece?
That's right.
I think he says. Yeah.
And she just comes up and gives him this really horrible news and treats it like a drama. She is not playing a comic role, and it makes it funny because the relationship that they have is so strange, that he's so big and she's so small emotionally.
Yeah. And she loves her son, and she doesn't think he's stupid. She's not asking him to grow up, but she's also like, you don't really get the sense in the film that she's the sort of the tropier version of this would be that she's just trying to keep him under her roof. Like, I've seen that before. It's either that it's like this weird, like, Oedipal relationship where it's like, you're my son and you can never do any wrong. And it's not that. It feels, as you say, like she plays everything for real, and it feels she's a good parent. I mean, she's letting her son and her husband,
beat each other half to death.
Yeah. But and she does, it just throws this beautiful, I think she says something as well, she throws this beautiful look at Chris Parnell at the end. Chris Parnell's like, should we stop them? And she's like, no, they're fine. and it feels so real.
Yeah, this time through, I was trying to figure out if she's also playing the guilt of having created the fantasy for Rod in the first place. Because I think there is a hint of it midway through, really, as she realizes the stakes are creeping up and that he's actually planning to jump all these buses. She starts to get a little more, like, obviously concerned that she's still supporting him, but there's a hesitancy, and it's like, oh, you did this to him. That's right. This is actually a choice.
Yeah. That's such a a great observation that she it this the stakes become quite real at least for her in the film that she's in, which is very much this film, but in that very dramatic playing of it. Yeah, of course, he's gonna die. He's not. He can't jump 15 buses.
But in that moment, just in that moment, you want to believe. I think that's the beauty of the movie too. That anybody in the Lonely Island, they're really interesting filmmakers,
Mm-hmm.
and the way they stage things and the way they build and use the sort of cynical expectations of the audience to then make jokes out of those situations and find comedy from the most preposterous premise will somehow pay off emotionally. Like every scene with Danny McBride, where Danny McBride in 2007 is the guy you cast to do that thing. He is the one person who does the thing Danny McBride does, to the point where now, like the show Bob's Burgers has a character named Zeke who's a small child and his baby Danny McBride, and it never stops being funny.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Every time I see McBride, and at this point in time, it was around The Foot Fist Way and the other movies he was doing, it's like I want to write him off, but he is so good at this thing, this like redneck testosterone agitation. But even here, they've given him dialogue that he wouldn't say anywhere else. He's like, this is what happens when I'm filled with green tea and I need somewhere to put my rage. I know I'm paraphrasing, but he's eloquent in a way that he isn't allowed to be. Like they saw that he could do it and they let him run with it.
Yeah. But also just like there's a lot of pathos in him. And you get that with like in Eastbound and Down, he very much like he's sort of terrible, but you can't help but love him. They're kind of like love, but yeah, it's definitely a subversion. Everybody in the film that is playing kind of their thing, playing up to their the perception of them, including Ian McShane. They're turning that slightly. Where there's just that really there's a really beautiful moment where he gives Rod the rock just before the jump.
Yeah.
It's so sweet. Again, the film, like these characters are really lovely. Like they're sweethearts. There's not this kind of like, and look, it's a part of it's part of adolescence, but they don't have that sort of like raunchy, like horned up kind of teenage thing that a lot of comedies had. I watched Dodgeball recently and I was like, like it just was like sending horrible feelings through my body. And like this just, it just doesn't have that. Everybody's heart is in the right place.
Yeah, the only thing I remember about Dodgeball now is all the Ocho stuff and how weirdly meta that is, given that the rest of the film plays so straight.
That exists, right? ESPN the Ocho.
I think it does now. They may have actually conjured it into existence.
Right. Yeah. There's just like also just a lot of like casual misogyny, homophobia, racism. But like I think a majority of studio comedies of that time are guilty of that.
Oh yeah. Well, not necessarily the racism, but the Farrelly brothers sort of pioneered a certain kind of really broad, really crass comedy with Dumb and Dumber, and then 10 years later it metastasized into what was going on in the early 2000s. And Meet the Parents, like the casual cruelty and torment that's heaped on people for whatever reason that the film can find. But yeah, and Hot Rod doesn't have it. Hot Rod has more in common, and this is a weird pull, but I saw them within 2 months of each other. I'm thinking about Son of Rambo, right?
Yeah.
The Hammer and Tongs film that I saw. I was on the jury in London at the BFI Film Festival in 2007.
That's where I saw it too.
I was probably there because I saw it at the public screening.
Yeah.
I love that movie so much. It's so pure, and it's the same kind of thing, right? Like it's about, and these are actual children in Son of Rambo making their big, preposterous, epic movie, but they're kind of playing on the same level as Rod and his friends, because they're completely oblivious to the way it will be received. They just want to do
Yeah,
the thing they love.
yeah. But it's like they're oblivious to the thing they're making, like, and how it's going to be received. But they're also like, the film is on their side.
Yes.
Like the film is really on their side. That the screening in Hot Rod is excruciating. Like it feels, at least for me, like it feels awful. I really want to take them out of that situation. And like the shot choices, like you get that. Richardson, that's his name, Richardson, the dancing guy,
Yes.
the flyer, the guy that puts out the flyers, his face and how he turns and he's like, why are you laughing? Don't laugh. It's like, it's really, yeah. Oh, Son of Rambo is another one. I'm going to watch that again soon.
Thank you.
That was a
Holds
good
up.
call.
I watched it again a little while ago. It's so tender when it doesn't need to be. I mean, so is Hot Rod, weirdly enough. Like, it is just a film about people caring about each other and trying to protect each other, except for Rod, who will do whatever it takes to his own body to prove a point. And Samberg knows on some level that he cannot go big enough, that there is no ceiling for him. There's no top to go over. Rod is he's introduced with this incredible determination to do something very modest and then mangling. I still don't know how they did that. There's that first jump where he just smashes into the side of the van and then crumples. That's clearly a body.
It's a real, that was a real stuntman who broke his leg or his arm
in that shot, in the stunt.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They didn't use any dummies for the film, so even the mountain, the flash dance sequence, the end of that, they're all stuntmen and Andy Samberg at the end, just on wires.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. Last week, I wrote about Universal's 4K special edition of Wicked Part 1 and Warner's bare-bones Blu-ray of Juror Number 2, and how they occupied totally different spaces as holiday season cult objects. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Simcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. We glimpse two stunts in the making of bit, and one of them is in the opening. It's not even a crash; he just slams into something. I suppose it's a crash, and then the big jump at the end where they've just digitally erased the wires, because this was right at that time where digital wire work was perfect, and everything else is still practical because they don't have the money to do elaborate CGI stunt work.
Yeah.
As opposed to something like Popstar, where there's bears and locusts and things rampaging through the film at any given moment. But Hot Rod is handmade in the same, in kind of the same way Son of Rambo is. They're both films that are grounded in their preposterousness.
Yeah,
they can't afford to do anything really big.
But then also, I guess that's the I guess like the meta text of the film is that the Lonely Island kind of are those kids in Son of Rambo. Like, I think, again, something I learned in that podcast is Lorne Michaels gave them a shot, basically, like handed them the script and were like, I think it was in their first year at SNL.
I believe so, yeah.
And trusted them to go make this film. And I think it's like it's a really nice film to look at. Like, it's so, I'm sorry to be this person, but I'm really missing color in films.
No, it's absolutely a thing. I mean, realizing too that this is 2007, it was shot on film. This was not a digital production from the Lonely Island guys. Like, there are shots of people with camera rigs on their shoulders running around.
Yeah, but they're new to this. They've made like a few shorts, I think, for SNL, which is obviously a big stage for them. But even you look at some of the early SNL sketches, they're pretty ropey sometimes.
Oh yeah. And I looked up the cinematographer because I knew he was English. That's literally the only thing I knew about him. And that was a weird disconnect that they got. Yes, he's a 3-time BAFTA winner who's worked with Robert Altman and Nicholas Heitner. He shot Precious right after this.
Wow.
He shot, but before this, he had shot um, everything from, like, he shot Gosford Park. And the company for Altman, he shot Mrs. Henderson Presents and The History Boys and Miss Potter before Hot Rod, and then immediately went around and made a bunch of other serious films. I do not know how they got him and how they all ended up in Vancouver to make this movie, which is, again, completely removed from anybody's comfort zone if they're coming off SNL. And it all makes sense. Like, it all feels right. You need an outsider's eye for this. Just,
Yeah.
like, to find the right distance to shoot people so they don't look like freaks, but also so that when Bill Hader's character has a piece of metal embedded in his head for a good 5 minutes and some of the most serious and moving conversations in the entire film, that it can look professional. Like, it's not a joke that this is happening. It's
Yeah.
you treat it seriously and you get the comedy.
But it also, I think it speaks to that thing of like aiming for the stars. They are taking this seriously. Like they're, I think you don't make this film with any doubt that you could, like I think obviously they were surprised about Sissy Spacek and Ian McShane saying yes, but 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 they're aiming for something that kind of elevates it. Like just the number of background in the riot scene.
That's right. I always forget about
like
the riot breaking out because it's such a wonderful start to that scene, and then
John Farnham,
and then it all just goes to hell. I mean, it's the Anchorman joke, right? That escalated quickly, but it is a different level of it because it doesn't stop. It's never fully absurd. Like, the violence feels real when it breaks out.
yeah, and it's real, and it's balletic. Like it's like it's really beautiful. Like the this like it's like a tableau of 3 people singing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like this, America. There's no white man in this group of 3, and they're stood there proudly singing "You're the Voice." Like it has a kind of, the joke isn't really the riot, like it's I think it's speaks again to just this like complete commitment to every moment in the film. Like they're not trying to get laughs out of the threat of violence. It's it's just like, no, this is a riot, so we're doing a riot, and we're gonna like kind of not refer to it to an extent. It's very quickly moved on from. I get one of my favorite jokes in the film is Danny McBride, Rico, holding the television set.
Yeah.
And so they're like, that, wow, that was crazy. And he's like, yeah, I mean, the only thing you could do was just get out of there and hope that no one gets hurt. And he's carrying a clearly looted TV set under his arm. No one references it at all.
Yeah. I always wondered if that, like, it's the Footloose punch dancing thing where he actually gets the choreography, or whoever's doing the dancing is doing the Kevin Bacon choreography half the time.
Yeah.
It's
great. Some of the stunts I like really, even the kind of sillier stunts, they're really well executed. The film doesn't blink. It's just like, we're doing this. Are you gonna come with me? And I think there's I see one of the films that I was gonna suggest we talk about was the Lego movie. And Phil Lord and Chris Miller have a very similar kind of I really fell in love with their films.
Oh yeah.
After, because I could really see the relationship between Hot Rod and 21 Jump Street. which is a different, tonally is quite different, but it just has that like manic, like yeah, it feels like my brain actually a lot of this film. And um I have ADHD, and did, as a child, and like it I think my my brain does it, like takes um it can sometimes, it takes everything as like seriously, but also like has the capacity to find everything and anything funny at any given moment, and moves on very quickly from one thing to another and can't really hold on one thing, but there's like a relationship between everything.
With me, it's OCD, and I'll fixate on stuff until I can stop, until I can figure out a way around it. And that's why it's funny you mentioned Lord and Miller, because their films to me have always felt like really deliberate constructions that are filled with goodies. There's something to look at. There's always something going on. And I can
Yeah.
lose myself in the construction of like a digital Lego landscape just as easily as I'll watch, Solo and see if I can figure out what bits are theirs. Because I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty sure Woody Harrelson ending that big action sequence with, and I really hurt my thumbs, is something that only they would come up with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, and this is their thing, it's also weirdly the Lonely Islands thing. And I'm trying to figure, Samberg must be a voice in the Lego movie somewhere, right? He's got to be banging around in there somewhere.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah. But they find, and I've interviewed them a couple of times over the years, and we talked about it in the Lego movie. They find the humanity in the polish, right? They'll see something that is absolutely a corporate product, and make sure you remember that the whole point of it is the feeling that you get when you're creating something on your own in your basement, and
Yeah.
how that can be. I mean, it's almost one of the first. Well, this is a bit of a stretch, but I think the Lego movie is a moment where it almost is the first commentary on how bad fan culture is getting, when it becomes about a father who refuses to let his children play with his toys.
Yeah.
And it's the way that a generation of people is being really shitty about Star Wars opening itself up with The Force Awakens, and trying things that were never possible before. And I've never understood that. It's a playset. You can always add more pieces. But what they do, and what Samberg and well, what the Lonely Island guys do, is make sure you understand that it's meant to be played with. Like the hot rod is there to be enjoyed and picked up and
Yeah.
shaken, right? Like you are supposed to
Yeah.
be in it. And I envy you seeing it alone for the first time, just because it would be just for you. Like you literally had it presented to you.
I had a near identical experience with Popstar like
Yeah.
a few years later. Again, it was me, just me in the cinema watching it. And just like, again, just completely fell into it and was like, this is a very different experience, because that film's very rooted in like, in the music doc tradition, and um very cleverly recreates that, whereas this feels like it exists in a world of its own, or in their world. But yeah, just me. I'm not really able to talk about about these things with many people, I think, because they like, with both of those films in particular. Me and my sister watched Popstar Never Stop Never Stopping together, I think last year, a couple of years ago, and she'd never seen it. And we were just sitting there like in tears. And it was such a lovely experience to share that. And again, I was really glad that you picked Hot Rod, as well as being a little bit like, am I about to sort of talk about this film like it's the most important film ever made? But then I don't know why I'm doing this, actually. Why am I doing this? It's not embarrassing if you don't care what people think.
Exactly. But on
Yeah.
some level too, when you're talking about a movie that you love, you do care that people like it too, right? Like it's culture, it's an art, it's an artifact, it's something that you want to share. Like that, my whole problem with well, it's not a problem, but the issue I always push back on myself with it as a film critic is that you have to be true to your own opinion and write it. Like obviously it's an act of incredible arrogance to believe that anybody needs to hear what I think about a movie.
Yeah.
But it's also the way that you get to see the movies for free. So obviously you have to figure something out. But the experience of reviewing movies like Hot Rod or Popstar is that I gave them, I think they both got 4 stars. I looked them up at 4 out of 5, and I think I underrated Popstar. But it's been weird because looking back, I read the review over and I'm right. I agree with myself. I think it's a masterpiece. It's the childish appreciation that they have for that world, right? Like they're thinking in terms of 80s and 90s movies, even though they're too young to have grown up on them, on the 80s movies anyway. Like Footloose is something they would have only seen on cable. And the thing that really struck me the second time through and the third time through is how little time it has for grown-up stuff. Like sex or romance or attraction or any of that stuff. The relationship that Denise and Rod have is incredibly chaste. She's the girl next door, and she's clearly on a trajectory to end up with him. But while it is clear that she is in a mature, well, not mature, but a grown-up style relationship, she is having sex with her boyfriend, with Will Arnett, who keeps talking about it.
About going to buy it. I'm just good. Maybe I'll get a box of dong bags.
Yeah. He's not mature. I'll make sure.
Gross.
But she is, and she's so patient with him, right? Like in the scenes with him, she's not indulging him exactly, but she's relating to him like, oh yeah, I guess I suppose I'm with this guy. And then she gets to play a relationship with, like, Isla Fisher gets to play a relationship with Samberg that is genuinely sweet. And that's the one thing that feels like it's straight out of a Will Ferrell project, like something that was left over from an earlier draft. Because if these characters were older, it would be a different dynamic. She would have to find something pure in this man-child to connect to. But since they're roughly the same age and they clearly share an entire childhood and adolescence, she can just relate to him as an equal and not break the spell of the movie. Yeah. And then she's off being an adult with her boyfriend, but when she's with Rod, she can just be a kid again.
I think she also, like, I get the sense that she disconnected from, they were, I mean, I'm not really sure how old they are. Like maybe she went to college and
I think so, yeah.
Got caught up in, she went to college, got caught up in adult life and has ended up back home and misses that, she misses what she left. And that there is this kind of like unblinking, unwavering, like optimism and hope in this group. They haven't really changed. And that is like a very, I really, as you're saying, like I really believe it feels credible that she would want to spend time, that she would want to be a part of that crew. And Rod's very lovable. He's very lovable, and there's something really infectious about the way he sees the world. And I think it's probably my favorite joke. It's in a lot of things. Phil Lord and Chris Miller do this a lot as well. That when she does the open mouth kiss, and he's like, that was just your mouth was it's very intense, like commenting immediately on the awkwardness of a situation or what just happened. I love that, and I love that it's her, because there's a version where that kiss feels very unearned, and you're like, there is no sexual chemistry between these two people at all, and there kind of isn't. There isn't a lot of sexual chemistry between them, and it is very puppy dog, like puppy love kind of thing. But the fact that she goes in for that big sloppy kiss, and actually like it's not right, and he's not very comfortable with it. I really love that. And she's not like, I think, it may be, I might be disagreed with on this, but I feel like she's not a thinly drawn out character. She maybe doesn't get quite as much space as the rest of the gang, which I think is kind of part of the point, really. She's not able to just like hang out with these grown up kids all the time. But she feels just as like her place in that group feels just as lived in as anybody else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the kiss works because it's the one time that Rod gets to have a little maturity as well, to just know something isn't right and say so, as
Yeah.
opposed to just going along with it because he might get laid, which is what a kid would do.
Mm-hmm.
He's had enough of a life to know when something doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And that's unexpected. Like, it's a good turn. It's a good piece of character development. It's probably the only character development he's allowed to have. But the fact that she brings it out in him is the point, right? Like, he is
Yeah.
responding to her. He's not just a completely narcissistic idiot. He earns the relationship as much as she does.
Yeah. Yeah. It is it's a more layered film than it really needs to be. I was even thinking about, like, there's, again, watching it this year, I was like, you could stretch to a sort of like satirical, you know, that there is something about this family member having to raise money, or having to harm themselves to raise money to be able to afford a procedure that insurance won't cover. You know,
Yeah.
like, it's quite an American story. I mean, it's that might be a little outlandish as a reading of the film, but I thought about it when I was watching. I was like, yeah, this is deep. This is depressing that he has to raise this money even.
Well, I mean, it's your classic motivational tool for any teen movie from the 80s, right? Like, you have to save something, save the farm, save the barn, pay for an operation. But
Yeah.
yeah, you and I are both from countries that have national health care.
For now we do, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. But only American movies have this running thing decade after decade where people need to raise the money for a life-saving transplant or operation or something. And it's such an odd little thing that they've chosen to build this entire movie around.
Yeah.
But it also gives Rod an excuse, right, to do whatever it takes to himself, to harm himself. Nobody ever asks what his pain tolerance is like and how much damage he's doing to himself.
No, I'm not sure that he asks himself though, as well. It's like, although he is kind of, he's fairly panicked at various points in the film.
Yeah.
It's like he's getting there. He's definitely reaching his limit. It's definitely severe internal bleed. I mean, he said after the jumps, it's like you probably have internal bleeding, and he like lists the amount of ribs he's most likely broken.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But he needs to finish it. It's a
I have
hero's
to
journey.
finish it. Yeah. He says, like, life is full of pain. What was it? Life is full of pain, but we just have to see the joy in it or something. We have to scrape ourselves through the joy. Just another, like, beautiful sentiment.
It's a motto. It's somebody's maxim.
Yeah.
I've been trying to figure out how this is ostensibly happening. We're talking because Timestalker is out on VOD this week, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out if I can connect Hot Rod to Timestalker, and I don't know that it really works. Although, in retrospect, your character is the closest to a Lonely Island / Lord and Miller observer, someone who gets to comment on the world while still being a part of it, but never really suffering. Like, you're sort of the release valve of every given scene, where you show up and dispense wisdom and move on.
And kind of undermines, everything.
Yeah, pointing out the pointlessness.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's also a personal connection, which is that, like, Alice Lowe, who I admire so much and have for a very long time, since I was a teenager, probably around the time that I watched Hot Rod for the first time was when I discovered Garth Marenghi and the shorts that she made, and like these very kind of oddball, self-referential things, like form of comedy. But I read the script for Timestalker, and it gave me that same feeling. I was like, this is just going for it. It's committing to this very this very grand idea, and she does kind of like undermine it as it goes on, but it holds on to its heart all the way through.
Yeah.
And also, this is like not really the sort of thing you're supposed to say when you're trying to get people to watch a film. But like the other part of it is I was like, I think this is a film that somebody is going to find at some point in like 15 years time. Somebody's going to find this film and it's going to be their favorite thing. And that's the kind of thing that I love. That's what I want to be a part of. It's not the Superbads and the Dodgeballs of the world. It's the Hot Rods. It's the thing that's just made with pure love and like wild abandon. And Alice is full of that. And she has such a like, deep knowledge of and love of cinema and of cinema history. But she also loves a bit of like silliness. Like that for me, Timestalker definitely gives me the same kinds of feelings as Hot Rod, and has since Alice first spoke to me about it 5 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's such an odd, fun charmer. I have been waiting for her second film, and it's taken so long. And I know it's everything, right? It's the industry, it's the nature of small films. And she was saying, we screened it in Secret Movie Club at TIFF in December. It was our Christmas picture, and it was such a great thing to put in front of a crowd, and it's like 400, 500 people. Again, just sitting through it, experiencing it, and not knowing what to do with it for the first few minutes. And then they all stayed for the Q&A, which means I think they got it. But it's such a huge gamble to throw out the style and the concept and the whimsy of it. That early little moments, like, that's not my dildo, put it away. Just these instantly telling you what kind of film it's going to be, and then waiting for you to get there.
Yeah.
It's such a pleasure. And I love that she could do it twice.
And I think she will keep doing it, because the other thing about Alice is that she's like, not to talk about another festival, but we went to Locarno.
Oh yeah.
And it was it screened at the Grand Piazza, and this huge screen in the middle of this Swiss seaside town. And there's something like I love going to a film festival. It's like primarily what I did when I moved to London. I just waited for LFF. I saved up to do that. So I love, but there is something a little bit stuffy about Locarno because of the setting. Mm-hmm. I'd say. And we sat down to watch Timestalker, and the whole square was just like bathed in pink. It's like this like almost sickly pink. And I just had this like overwhelming feeling of yes, this is it. Like, it just has, I don't know. She really knows her shit, but she's unpretentious. She's not like trying to impress you with how much she knows. She's trying to tell a good story that says something about what she cares about. And it really, I think it really comes through. Yeah. I'm very excited about whatever it is she does next.
Yeah. Well, and of course, the other connection between Hot Rod and Timestalker is that the protagonist just gets the snot beaten out of them over and over again and never stops.
Yeah. And there's a lot about Agnes that is not, like, I don't know. Alice clearly loves Agnes, but she's not afraid to like beat her up. Mm. I mean, I feel uncomfortable with the fact that I just said beat her up, but in a story sense. Like
Allegorically, yes.
allegorically, she's throwing tomatoes at her constantly, but you really, you know, you don't necessarily agree with her decision making, and you can see her slipping on the tomatoes, and you just want to say, just turn left or right, but you still love her in the same way that you still love Rod. You want to say to Rod, just, I don't know.
Maybe jump 12 buses.
Maybe just teach some kids how to ride motocross or something. Like, maybe don't put your life at risk. You could read this film in a much darker way. But we don't need to go there, because I think there's something about Hot Rod that is so joyful that I only want to see it in that way, And again, the alternative could have been, we could have been talking for an hour about death and anxiety and kittens.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we're...
This was better.
Yeah. I think this was more appropriate.
My thanks to Jacob Anderson, who joins Alice Lowe, Tanya Reynolds, and Nick Frost, among others, in Alice's new film Timestalker, arriving Friday in U.S. theaters and on digital just in time for Valentine's Day. Thanks also to Kim Dixon. She knows what she did. You can find Jacob on Instagram at Jacob Anderson, all one word, and you can find Hot Rod on Blu-ray and DVD from Paramount Home Entertainment. It's also streaming on Hoopla and Pluto TV in the U.S. and available to rent or buy on various VOD services in the U.S. and Canada. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 41 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get the new booster as soon as you can. I'll see you next week.